In this module, we're going to look at curtain wall components, a specific type, modular curtain wall components, really very popular in the industry as a method of constructing high-rise and high-density housing systems. And in order to prepare us for that, I've assembled some case studies so you can get an idea of the variability and the techniques used in developing these types of curtain wall systems. So to reiterate, this idea of a module, so down here I'm circling, let me grab my highlighter here if I can grab it. Here we have the module, and then it's played out. In this case, I've drawn a curved wall and populated with different levels with that repeating module. And you can do a lot with these modules. The modules can be solid, so I can replace a transparent one with a solid one. They can have any kind of feature set they want on them. And it's kind of an empowerment on the designer's part to come up with techniques and methods to create as much interest and activation of the facades as you can within the system of its modularity. So one of the first case studies I wanted to discuss was One Vanderbilt Place. This is on Manhattan. This is a mixed-use building, I think residence and commercial use. It's extremely tall building. It's one of the new landmarks in New York City. To give you an idea of its scale, One World Trade Center, one of the newest buildings after 9/11, to replace the Twin Towers. And you can see this soaring to 550 meters. But you get an idea of the other buildings, the other notable high rises in on the island of Manhattan. And so it's a significant project. And this is a base view of it. And once again, I think it's clear that you can see the modularity of the facade. You can see the repeating elements. And there's a lot of features that went into this, and I have a bit of experience with this project, so I can add, I guess, a little bit of a storyline to it. This is clad with a terracotta. I'm putting these images in so you can get an idea of not only its relationship as a tower to the skyline, but what happens here at the pedestrian level. And once again, I've discussed this before, but this is the podium level of these buildings. They typically are multi-story or what would be multi-story open spaces, creating grand entrances to the building and activating the street life. A nice shot of the interior of the building. You know, and things that really aren't necessarily related to the project we're doing, but are just interesting nonetheless. Very popular now, this green wall type of construction. One Vanderbilt uses a terracotta facade, and we're fortunate enough in Western New York to have the company that produced this facade, Boston Valley Terracotta. And the material here you can see is these white panels that are diagonally cut on the facade of the module. And here's a picture of one of those modules going into position. So they're being hoisted with cranes. This is a starting unit, so actually what happens is that you get an idea of the relationship of the terracotta panel to the floor system. So these panels are actually starter courses. So you have some kind of a transition down to the podium and then the start going up of the unitized assembly. And here's a shot of the module being staged for installation. This could be someone checking the clip systems or the preparing this panel for being craned or lifted into position. You can see now the terracotta panels at the base. Up here we have the glazing system. I'm sorry, my pointer was a little static there. So here we have our glass, our curved terracotta tile system, this kind of a trim transition piece. And notable and something that we you know is really beyond the scope of an introductory course in computer visualization, but interesting nonetheless, is the clip system. So here we have these aluminum extrusions that form the module, and then bolted to it we have these clips. These clips are what will be the attachment both from one unit to the next and then tying back to attach to the building. And once again, we have that idea of the starter strip of the unit, this transition to the podium level, and the first ones that go in. And you can see these tangs coming out, those pieces right here, and those will be what will catch the next panel going into position. Typical to all projects of this scale, and even much smaller scales, are the idea of a mock-up that is created first. So here we have a visualization done at either the factory or the vendor who may be making the glazing systems, and they're detailing out all of the kind of conditions where panels are coming together, how that will look, the appearance of the trim between things. All the little details are here for evaluating in what they call a mock-up. And so investors, architects, all kinds of people will visit this mock-up to determine that the design is meeting the criteria and the aesthetics that everyone had wanted. And there are some, I guess, interesting places where the module system has to make some kind of accommodations for the changing shape of the building. So here we have these panel systems in that mock-up coming because we have that angled facade, having these tapered panel systems. And then there's a dealing with how you make a square panel fit into a curvilinear shape. So the mock-up helps to work that out, but not so much work it out, but help people to understand visually how it's going to look in the project. So I said I had some involvement with this project, and this is the part of the project that I was brought into. They were needed to make really a small scale mock-up of the tile system. So we're looking here at an early mock-up of about a half scale of these. So these curved tiles are still terracotta, they're still extruded. They're the exact same shapes that will go into the final project, but they are in fact just scaled down. And the way the project panned out of this mock-up was I had consulted for Boston Valley Terracotta, and I was currently consulting for a company called Rigidized Metals, and they approached Rigidize to help them figure out how to mount these tiles into this cassette so that they could deliver this mock-up to the client. And this is very early in the program. There were a lot of things that Boston Valley, they wanted to win the contract, and their part of it was coming up with the tile, but also the glazing system that went on the surface of it. It was a big critical decision in the project that the glazing had the proper appearance. And then there were these metal pieces, which were the responsibility, at least at this point in the project, of Rigidized Metals as that contrasting element between the panels. A little more on that idea of color, just to fill in what architects spend a lot of their time doing. The reason terracotta was chosen for the building was that terracotta in the architecture of downtown New York City is ubiquitous and historic. And so a new building using that same materiality was important for helping them win preservation approval and community acceptance. So a new building using old materials, just like new brick buildings, would garner success in communities that use a lot of brick type construction materials. So terracotta was chosen, and then it was really about making a beautiful what they call a glazing on the tile. So terracotta comes out, it has a brick-like color, and then it is glazed with all kinds of ceramic materials that can have this kind of iridescence, which is what these panels are covered with. And this idea of even the rawness of it. So here the application of the glazing at the corners tends to bleed away and expose some of the terracotta beneath it. But that characteristic is considered desirable. And here we are just working on the mock-up, putting those things in place for that. And to contrast that in size, and it's probably a little hard to see, but these are pallets of the panels now at full size. So you can see where we only have one little hole on both sides of the panel here. Now when they're full size, we've got these much larger openings. So this ribbing in the panel is intended to reduce the weight of the terracotta. So the terracotta is a hollowed out extruded material, and the hollows reduce the weight of the terracotta. Excuse me. Okay, so back to our project. I think what's interesting, I mentioned this idea of a starter strip. You notice how it seems like this would be the bottom of the window, but in fact it's really the top in the way the panels are getting installed. So the terracotta is at the head of and we know this to be called a spandrel now. So it's at the top of the panel as it goes in and continues that way up the building. And just another image of this project. Once again, you can see the modules. You can see that little ribbing of the connection where the two panels are coming together, trying to make them look as seamless as possible at this juncture. And here we have probably a walkthrough by the client to inspect some of the construction techniques. A lot of this is this white is covering stainless steel, and this is just a protective covering. Down here we have insulation. It just doesn't have a finished surface on it. These are some of the models that I produced for the project. These were actually done in Vectorworks, but these could have easily been done in Revit. Mock-up of the model versus reality. And this is the containment system to hold those panels in place. This is not actually how it would be manufactured, but this was a way to create an adjustable holding system for them, not completely unlike what probably got built. But a lot of the work of architects and designers is really concentrated into these kind of details. So I think it's just an important when you're thinking about this project, this project that we're going to work on specifically to make a module, that you understand that that's part of the complex work that architects do. Another thing I wanted to kind of bring home on a project of this scale, especially when we're talking about these large-scale modular high rises and other dense large projects, is the timeline of them. So here we have the initial pour of the building in 2017. So they're pouring the foundations for what looks like it'll be the elevator core of the building here. And we started the mock-up for this in 2012. So 5 years prior to even breaking ground, work was already started on the construction or the details of how the project would get built. And since, to give you an idea, at that, negative 5 years before the building started, Boston Valley Terracotta was in a competitive situation with other terracotta manufacturers to produce this tile for the building. So they were doing these mock-ups in conjunction with the architects even before they were awarded the contract to produce the panels. So that was one Vanderbilt significant project, and over what's almost a 10-year or more timeline from start to finish. And in New York City, there are all kinds of these modular systems going up, and this is actually a really cool building that's also using terracotta. That's also a modularized concept, and I introduce it because it's so radically different looking. If we look at this. The articulation of this facade, this is much more curvaceous and almost traditional looking. And it's a very slender tower. These slender towers are of increasing popularity around Central Park and other places that garner magnificent views of the city. They are for the mega rich. They afford incredible views, and with them comes a lot of attention to architectural detailing. So I believe this project, yes, it was done by Shop Architects. So here we have, once again, terracotta tiles, but now instead of going on the diagonal, they're going vertical along the building. Still a modularized assembly. You can see the breaks between the panel systems as they're both horizontally and vertically. So this could be erected in a modular fashion, but a stunning facade on the building, I think. And there were a lot of work with the idea of the filigree patterns that went with this. This is just the embellishment of, I guess, what goes on in the projects of this nature. This kind of patterning evaluation was done in collaboration with the city, probably the planning board and the preservation groups, to make sure that everyone was happy with the appearance of the building. And this was a landmarks presentation. Another thing that was in this system that makes it remarkable are these LED lighting systems that help to play up the curved shapes that were developed in the extrusion of the terracotta. Notable for a designer in architecture, notice the play of light when a source is coming from the side on a steep angle. These nice deep shadow details that are created. So at night the building will take on a much more dynamic look than it does in the daytime. And like I said, these are really for the ultra wealthy. So this is a view out of one of the floor levels out over Central Park. And here's the building under construction. So you can see the nature of these going up in a modular format. And interestingly, while this facade looks very transparent, as if these were glazed glass systems through them, you can see that they're really mostly filling a solid structural wall. So a lot of what went into the addition of the glazing was not really to afford views, but to afford the illusion of transparency of the building on the skyline. And once again, back to the idea of these mock-ups. So we saw one Vanderbilt with a mock-up, and here's another mock-up for evaluation. And it gives you an idea of the scale of the panel systems. These are probably architects with shop doing a site visit at the vendor that's manufacturing the panel systems, most likely. And I included this one again just to show you how these are panelized systems that are going in. And I think this is one of the last examples of this idea of modular curtain wall construction. This is in the city of Buffalo in the medical corridor. This is Roswell Park, and this was done by FX Collaborative, FX Fowl I think it was at the time. But here we have really a mix of glass curtain wall and then these modular terracotta additions to it. So I think this is really a beautiful articulation of a facade. So you'll notice the variations here. We have both different panel systems. Some have grooves, some are smooth. We also have the idea of these baguettes, which we will be doing in our project. We have actually a couple of different sizes of baguettes. Or actually, no, I think these are the same size, but it's just a different articulation where we have multiple ones and then single ones going across. So this is where the designer has total freedom to experiment with the way they group, join, and design these modules to create an overall effect to the facade. And once again, so here we have what would have been proposed as maybe an all-glass facade, now kind of toned down and warmed up with the application of a terracotta panel system within it. And I think this is really quite a beautiful and effective modular curtain wall system. So that really concludes our introduction to that. I hope that will help to set the groundwork for what is really a very simple project, but I hope it has a lasting memory so that you can then take it forward in projects that you'll do in studio and in work in the future.